Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Last Word with Naya podcast. Today I have Coleman McAllister with the McAllister Hours Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, I've been on your podcast, so
hmm
it's only fair.
Well, I appreciate that. I was telling one of your friends here in the show, but how Iowa is such a unique place because people are just always trying to find each other and always trying to bring that kind of atmosphere to each other. Just build each other up, and I think
Yeah,
that's
like connected,
exactly. I think that's what
more
we're here.
sense of
So
like community.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So I guess just tell everybody about your podcast, like how long you've been doing it, what's your concept for your podcast? Like,
Um,
what do you?
So I've been doing the podcast for about 3 years now. We've been kind of coined like the Joe Rogan of Iowa. Basically just the goal is to just have as many people on as possible that are in the area representing Iowa in some way, whether it's like entrepreneurs or musicians or people involved in film. Just trying to get everybody in. And I always try to like bring a edgy vibe to the podcast. I always try to bring edgy humor. We haven't done it in a while, but we had something called the Fucked Up Bucket, which is just basically just a series of oh yeah, that's right, we did a little bit of
We
that.
did do we did do
Yeah.
one, and I got one that was like it really wasn't fucked up. It was just very educational and
hmm
funny, actually.
Yeah, it's funny that that clip remains like one of the most like just bashed on, because all the Christians obviously just got fucking
And that clip,
yeah.
for you guys who don't know, when I went on the podcast, I did the fucked up bucket.
Yeah.
I pulled a card. The card said something to the effect of, what was it? Something like,
Basically, it was that essentially it was about like how in the Crusades Christians killed about like 12 million people in search of a cup.
yeah,
It was some
yeah.
joke like I don't know how the exact joke went.
They want to say everybody else, every other
Yeah,
religion is violent, but
but of course everybody got just fucking pissed.
yeah,
It's like,
the,
how dare you?
something like everybody wants to say that Islam is such a violent religion. Meanwhile, Christians slaughtered like
Yeah,
1 million people for a cup during the Crusades, you
yeah,
know?
exactly.
Um,
There's just a lot of hypocrisy.
yeah,
It goes back to the same generic. It doesn't matter if it's politics or religion. You have the in group, you have the out group, you have A and B, and
right.
people just there are people who are so dedicated in their belief system that they just put like very obvious, deliberate blinders to that. And
Right.
kind of going back to what I try to do with the podcast. I'm a free speech advocate. I'm an absolutist. Our episode unfortunately got taken off YouTube because of COVID related things, which is unfortunate. Um, yeah, fuck you. No, I'm
Um,
kidding.
yeah,
No, I'm kidding.
I don't, I mean, I would say it all again. I don't feel like we said anything that was
I agree.
untrue. It was stuff that was in the news at the
Yeah.
current time of like new findings of finding, okay, this isn't what we thought it was, or
hmm
hey, we lied a little bit, or
Yeah.
you know,
Well, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, I mean, I think everybody deserves a voice. I mean,
yeah,
even if you have like a crazy conspiracy theory or an opinion, like I want to be able to give you the mic and say, "Hey, what do you think?" Like, I think that's one
right.
of the biggest problems with, social media and media in general is that there's such like a direct censorship on, whatever ideas or, things are going on.
I agree with that. And I feel like one of the things also is just the idea that you know, the only way to combat bad speech is more speech, like good speech.
Yeah.
You have to let those thoughts be heard, even if you don't agree with them, to make progress on those thoughts.
Yeah.
The spectrum of the way every human life is different, and they grow up in different environments with different indoctrinations and nurture versus nature situations that they end up, they have these views for whatever reason. And if they're only surrounded by people that have those views, and or they're shut down every time they express those views, and they never
Yeah.
get a place to say, here's how I think or how I feel based on my environment and how I was brought up. There's never an opportunity to be like, hey, have you considered this? Do you know about this and this? Like, present them with facts, present them with a valid argument. That's my biggest thing always is if you cannot you can tell me whatever. You can be
Sure.
like, this Donald Trump is innocent on all this stuff. He's the greatest, whatever. But if you have no facts to back this up to me, then it's not even worth it. If you're not willing to dig deep enough and even look at things, then I don't want to have a conversation. It's not a conversation. You're just you what's the phrase, right? Once you've bested a fool, like you've already
Oh
you've
yeah, sure,
lost. Like
sure.
there's no point in putting the energy into somebody that's not even capable of taking that in.
Yeah. Well, and that's a real problem with religion, right? Is like, I mean, this kind of goes in terms of politics as well, but like, especially with religion, it gives people the ability to just say, "Oh, I'm not listening. I don't care," and
I agree with that.
it gives you a pass, even though like, even to this day, like things with like the church and like, homophobia and like their,
Right.
they're just wild assertions about that. I guess some of them valid, but like for the most part, just
Yeah, I
crazy. It's always rooted in the fact that like you're making it your business to for whatever.
see people's lives,
Exactly.
which
And
is government. That the church was the first version of big government.
sure. Yeah.
They kept the
Yeah.
people very stupid. They kept the rise of the Catholic Church in general, like all of that, the way it was orchestrated. I mean, religion's such a rabbit hole. I just try and sum it up in one of these things with I feel like they all have their valid points. And if for whatever reason, it's the idea of who cares who the messenger was? Did you get the message?
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Who cares if it was Jesus or Muhammad or anybody else? Did you get the message? Did the
Sure.
message still come through that you have these things that you shouldn't do that are just morally bad? Ways to be a better person. I feel like religion, all religions, no matter what religion, they all have the same foundations of
Mhm.
trying to better yourself and be a better person to have what not only to set your children on a better path, but to, you know, if you believe in that an afterlife, to achieve that, right?
Sure.
So it's like you get the most reward out of life, I think, being a good person at the end of the day. Like, no matter how much it looks like the other side is winning, like, evil never wins. Like,
Mhm.
it's just one of those things. Like, it gets close, but it just never wins. Being a good person always trumps everything at the end of the day. And it'll come back to you in the craziest ways. You'll be like, oh my God, where did this? And then you're like, oh shit. You know
Yeah.
what? I just did something nice for somebody the other day. This must be, or whatever, like, I think the energies for religion are always to reach that enlightenment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can definitely agree with you that there are like
But
um
the rules is where it gets sketchy, right? Like,
yeah, well, and I think the key thing to like I'm an atheist personally, and like the key thing that I fight against is like the institutions themselves. I'm not really concerned about like Grandma Betty who like just reads her Bible every day, just
okay,
believes in like yeah,
heartless.
sure. I mean, and I've had Jason Bennell, who is the secretary for the Iowa Atheists and Free Thinkers, um, here in Iowa or in Des Moines on the podcast, and he'll argue that like if you're giving money to an institution, you're still kind of feeding it's like the homophobia and all like the wars and all the things, and that's true too. But like the focus should be on these. Like I'm gonna care more about like the church who has all this money that
Is
is
tax exempt and
sure, and I personally sure.
anti.
Sure. And I personally, I'm not a fan of taxes. I don't think they should have to pay taxes, but I think there is something fucked up about the fact that they, don't pay it
I agree
when
with
everybody
that.
else does. Like that's
I agree
definitely
with
an
that.
unfair, like you're giving an unfair advantage to that. I think that's something that,
I always agreed with that as well.
yeah, I think it's a lot of people like to overlook too. They'd be like, oh, it's the churches in there. There was, I can't remember. There was an evangelist, preacher who just died. I can't remember what his name is, but good
Mm.
riddance.
Yeah.
But
I follow that world.
I don't either.
And mega churches, that shit
Fuck
scares
that
the
shit.
fuck out of me. It's the idea. That's how it's always one of those things when it comes to like it's like comedy or live entertainment in a way. It's a
Hmm.
form of mass hypnosis.
Hmm.
It's why Martin Luther King was able to speak to people and he could move people with his voice. Barack Obama, there's certain people that are just incredible
Yeah.
speakers. I think that applies to evil as well.
Mhm.
On the flip side, you have Hitler, who was able to just to go up there and rant about how these people are destroying your country, even though they're neighbors, you know these people, you've known them forever,
Yeah.
but you're starving, therefore you give in to this mindset of like, yeah, they're the reason we're starving, they're the reason we're in this position type of thing. Like, and and it's the Trump idea too, right? The MAGA world. I don't feel like that's hypnosis. I feel like that just empowers a lot of people that already have those mindsets
Yeah.
and they're free to be that person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, essentially what it is it's people who have certain personality traits about them that make them
Yes.
good public speakers, and they take advantage of one of two routes, which is
Charismatic,
exactly.
Yes.
They take a hold of either religion or they take a hold of either the government. And going back to like your Hitler point, you could actually make the argument that the whole reason that started is, I mean, yes, the anti-Semitism was a lot of it, but it was because after World War One, the government had said, okay, this is how we're going to divide Germany. This is how we're going to put things. And that unrest is what caused the riot. Like, in theory, if we had not intervened in how that Germany was set up, there would be no Holocaust in theory. There wouldn't have been 6 million Jews that
he was starving. I think people forget that. Like these wars, World War One depleted the UK, depleted Germany in general. Like they were starving. All these countries were starving and they were weak. They just got out of a war. They didn't have the rebound to jump right back into something. And I mean, before 2 years before we were going in there for the Holocaust, he was Times Man of the Year. We were doing the Olympics with them.
Yeah.
We were racing against them. It was a black man that beat them.
Well, in the
Like we were over here making history.
exactly.
And he's like, I don't even care. I'm just getting ready to murder these millions of people. Cool.
Well, in the early days of the Holocaust, the New York Times actually denied it. Like they had articles that they released. Like people don't talk about this, but like they had articles and headlines were like denying both that and like the Soviet Union.
That's relatable to nowadays, right? Like, how long did it go
Exactly.
before they literally squashed pieces about the laptop with Hunter Biden as well? They
still squashed.
Yeah, they
Still
totally
squashed.
on that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't like anybody that's like, I'm left wing, I'm right wing. Like it's the same wings of the same bird. It's the same problem. If you're the right wing of the same bird and like liberals are the tail or whatever you think you're doing differently, but
Yeah.
it's like, have you tried humanity? Just like the idea of being civil with each other. Like the idea that we're still in an age where it's 2023 and we're having these people shooting and killing like black people in broad daylight and just being like, oh, I was in fear for my life. I felt like, and admit that they're calling them the N word. Like I called them that many times. I just didn't like them and their kids. And you're like, so it's a hate crime then. So you're racist and you just murdered these people. No, 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 no. Like let them get a fair trial. She's a grandma. She's somebody's grandma. Like I remember learning about Ruby Bridges in school.
Who's Ruby Bridges?
Really?
I'm not.
Are you fucking with me?
No, I'm not. Ruby, who's that? Was that during the? I don't know what that even that. I don't even know what that was. I look like an ignorant piece of shit, but I really don't know what Ruby Burns is.
So Ruby Bridges.
Oh, Bridges. Sorry.
Yes.
Bridges.
She was the first girl in her school, black girl in her school.
Okay.
In I think Mississippi to begin to like segregate.
Okay.
Like integration. She was the first one.
Okay. Okay.
Escorted into the school every day by
okay. I do know who that is now. I just didn't have the yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So and it's like the pictures of these people, like snapshot. This was 60 years ago. They take pictures. They were taking pictures and they've got barricades along the side as these policemen are walking this tiny little girl into the school. And the faces, like they took all their kids out of school. They were like, my kid is not going to go to school with her. They're not going to learn next to her. You know, they took,
Hmm.
and they're screaming, like the hate on their faces, like screaming at this child, like they didn't see like a child. So
Hmm.
it's like those, okay, snapshot, 60 years later, where are these people? That little girl standing next to her mom that's also screaming these slurs at this little girl, whose grandma is she now? You know, literally, that is the people that raised
Yeah,
our parents, and our parents raised us. Like, that is a generation ago, a generation and a half ago. It's not
sure.
that far. Like, the idea that it's always never forget, remember 9/11, remember the Holocaust, never forget this idea. But Black people are told slavery happened so long ago, just forget. Just get over it. Forget it. Nobody nowadays was a slave. Like Dave Chappelle has talked openly about like
Yeah.
his grandmother was a slave. Like
Hmm.
she's one of the last like people in Texas that was like freed and like remembered this and told this to his mom and taught all this stuff to them. And it's like the idea that it's one human lifetime ago,
Hmm.
less than one human lifetime ago, that we were literally enslaving people.
Yeah, well, and I think this kind of goes back to the point of government, right? It's
Right.
like that cultural difference between like white and black or any kind of minority group. Like I do think that's improving. I think the thing to think about is like how much of a role government's played in racism. And like I think that is like I actually caught a lot of heat for this in a recent clip, like talking about like it started with the legalization of slavery, and then they were like, okay, we're gonna make that illegal, but then we're gonna have Jim Crow laws. And then we're gonna get rid of those, but then we're gonna bring in the welfare state. We're gonna make drugs illegal, and they just keep continuously doing these things. Like, and it's so sinister because it's in a mask and it's in a cloak that screams like, "Oh, we're helping this group of people,"
I agree with
and
that.
they're doing the complete opposite.
I agree with that.
And I think a lot of people need to make that distinction and like look at things like drug legalization or whatever. Like look at like how is government, like, because I think that's the way forward. I think when you tackle everything from this the racial part or the social part, I mean, yes, there are good points, but you can only get so far with the argument. I think if you want to make
Yeah,
real changes, it comes down to government. It comes down to how we're going to run our government, how much power we're going to give government, how much
I agree.
how much are we going to take away from them to make these issues better.
I think the main solution, it's always the hardest way, and it's like we can take the long road, which is just waiting for these old fucking racist pieces of shit to die and filter out, and then we start getting these younger, more in tune people, but that takes a while. That takes a long time.
Yeah.
And I really don't feel like it's in a weird way, I don't feel like we really have that time. We're pushing that 250-year mark of
Yeah.
like democracies when they begin to fail.
Hmm.
And we're pushing it at this point. Like our debt ceiling is at the max, and we just keep like
Yeah.
refinancing. We're at a point where we're gonna like our civil rights situation is at a head. Like we we're not we're not in a position where we're paying attention, like
Yeah.
I always compare this like I did on my last podcast. It's Rome. We are modern day Rome. It's nobody else, it's us.
I would agree with that 100%. Yeah. I
We're
think
the
that,
most debaucherous, we're the most like flashy, everybody wants to be there, we're the place to
yeah.
be, we've got the coolest shit,
Well, yeah, and
but we're the most like
yeah, well, we feel the need to police the world. I
we
mean,
do.
we, kind of, if you look at like this whole Ukraine thing, like, criticizing Russia for invading Ukraine,
NATO caused that. Like
yeah, I
all
would
we
agree.
have to do was, to me, like, is renounce this and step away. Say we're not gonna be thinking about letting Ukraine into NATO at any time soon right
Yeah,
now.
I would,
And Russia would have backed down, but they flat out told us, if you put them in NATO or talk about it, we're gonna attack them.
yeah.
We're gonna try this. They told you.
Yeah, well, I mean, and not even in regards to that, like just the mere fact that they invaded, like, and I'm not saying that that's okay. It's awful what they did, but it's really hypocritical for us as the United States, who has been invading the Middle East for the last 30 years, to go and be like, hey, how bad is it for this country to invade? Funny enough, a country that we've been funding with arms since like 2014. Like
Ukraine, for the people that don't know, if you Google it, if you look at the top most corrupt countries in the world, Ukraine is like number 3 for like money laundering, corrupt,
mhm.
like government, like this has been like an internal like back and forth between them and Russia. Russia had their own guy in there for a while, so there was no conflict. He was doing everything Putin wanted him to do. But at the end of the day, they want to rebuild the Soviet Union. They want to have that glory back. It's it's not going to happen, you know.
Yeah.
I think depending on like I've heard a
Well,
few
Russia's suffering.
things about like yeah, Russia's suffering on top of I've heard like Putin might like I've heard he's like really sick.
Well, did you hear about that dam that just blew up?
Was
I
it
don't,
the dam or the bridge? Like they blew their own bridge up or some shit like that, but
it
they
might.
didn't.
Well, okay,
It
so
was us.
the pipeline happened
I saw that.
months ago. I don't
We
know.
did that.
Okay, yeah.
We did that.
Either us or the Ukraine.
Pipeline.
Yeah, 100%. But then there was this dam that just broke, and it technically affected both sides, but like that was another thing that affected Russia most. It's very interesting how this is all kind of unfolding, and like,
Fight, bro. Let them
yeah,
fight. Like, unless it's a full out genocide, let this shit happen. It's been going on. That's human nature. I think we forget that. We live in such a time where we're so, and especially in America, where we are so sheltered in little bubbles
yeah,
that it is 100% like we just get in our little cars and we go to our job or we go to do this, we hang out with our friends, blah, blah, blah. It's okay. Like you hear gunshots and you're like, oh my God, whoa, I gotta get out of here. But like, you don't realize like the generations that built us what we come from is direct confrontation with other people.
hmm
And like the idea that we're okay with that happening anywhere but here. Here,
they're even okay with it happening here. I mean, they're okay.
killing everybody here.
Well, but okay, but like, look at the police. Like, they're okay with the police taking force.
That's still
Well,
like
I get,
we get to kill our own people, y'all don't get to kill us type of thing.
yeah, but I guess that was my point.
People.
Yeah,
I don't get me started on the idea of the prison system because that's another like
yeah.
whole
Well,
industry
yeah.
that no other country like America
Mhm.
does the prison system. We are known for that. Like
Well, it's because of the war on drugs. I mean,
people
we're back to that.
have come from other countries and like had kids and stuff here. And one of the things they told them is like, hey, the police do not mess with the police here. If they pull
Mm.
you over, you are brown. You are brown. They do not care that you're Middle Eastern. They do not care that you're whatever. They say you're brown and you need to just be so respectful and it's like, wow. And
Mm.
they're an immigrant. They're coming from a country that we consider probably a third world country. That like, oh, they're so corrupt, blah blah blah. But they're not killing their citizens in the streets. Like you can pay the cops off in most of these countries.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah, you can take my weed. All right, here's $50 as
Yeah.
well. All right.
Well, I mean, they're probably still killing people in the streets, but
There's no place like America that's like straight up very much like racism. Like we really do. It is very much always one way versus the other.
you think America is the most racist?
Just in how we listen, America was the last country to abolish slavery. And then
Yeah.
and we're the only ones that put in these, like you said, Jim Crow and all these other stipulations and
Sure. Sure, but I guess like culturally, I would say like there are countries that like I mean, we can at least like live next door. Like people who are different, different nationalities or whatever, can at least live next door to each other. I mean, there are countries where I mean, you're on the other side of town and someone gives you a wrong look. I mean, they'll kill you. I mean, that's the kind of attitude that's.
The difference is I think nobody's like quite like America, I guess.
Sure. No, I mean, look, I think the key point is like, and I go back to it every time, is government, is how the police act, how the military act. I mean, I think people like to conflate like the entire American population with how like the police act or how the military act. And I don't believe that. I believe that they're a separate malicious entity who is, stealing money from people through taxes and just, going about however they want to go.
Yeah.
Like I do not view like whatever population of America, I don't equate that to like how the police are acting or how the military is acting. I think they're separate.
Yeah. I agree with that. So with your podcast, you
Sure.
kind of seem, I'm gonna say like you seem like you have a large amount of like ethnic people that, look like me. You have a
Yeah.
lot of
Sure.
black artists and
Yeah.
stuff that are in Des Moines and stuff
Hmm.
that are local.
Yeah.
Um, so there is a clip that I am interested in. Can I ask you
Sure.
about it?
Sure. Go for it. Go for it.
Okay. So I do know that there's a clip where you talked about the idea of an N-word pass, right?
I don't actually believe that.
Okay.
It's in comic form. I always like to.
You had an artist we know. Shout out to Rare Doozy. He's
Oh,
awesome. I've
oh
had
hell yeah!
interviews
Oh
with
yeah!
him
Yeah!
on the podcast, and it was during Black History Month.
Yeah.
So there was just things, as a black woman that kind of stood out to me that I was curious about.
Okay. Sure.
Um, so you were asking,
This is why I got the light here, right?
right, right. Uh, so the idea was, and I don't quite remember the two other artists you had on.
Oh, that Dirt Lord and King Sir.
There you go. Who are white guys,
Yeah.
like you, and Rare Doozy is light skinned,
Yeah,
very
he's
light
mixed.
skinned,
Yeah.
mixed. Um, so I was just interested in what prompted you to, there were a few things that were said, just like,
They didn't like.
yeah, that kind of rubbed me wrong,
Sure.
right? Not so much rubbed me wrong, but just made me curious.
Okay.
Because I've been on your podcast,
Sure.
and like I said, plenty of other artists I know, that are black artists.
Sure.
So I'm just curious, and what is the idea of getting the N-word passed?
So I guess the idea behind that is I'm always trying to be edgy and humorous. I think pushing the bounds of what is taboo and what is socially acceptable, that is a key ethos in my life that I've always had. Um, Now, I mean, look, I with the N word specifically, I've always kind of felt that like it's a little overinflated in terms of, the severeness. Obviously, there's a if I were to use it right now, that's bad, right? And I would never do that. But like, if you look at like even like, something like coon or like, it's several like
Right.
words that are like far worse. And I feel like, I feel like
That word is worse than the N-word.
yeah, I like if and obviously I don't know what that's like.
Right.
I don't know what it's like being black or whatever, but obviously if you didn't tell. But I think I guess at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to break these bounds. I'm trying to make people ask questions. Nothing that I do is intentionally trying to offend anyone. I'm trying to make people ask questions. And I mean, look, my humor, if people get offended by it, I don't really know what to say to that. I mean, I have a certain blend and I have, I like to ask questions and, maybe some of it comes off as insensitive a lot of times, but,
Right.
at the end of the day, I think we're all people. And I think, like I said, I think the things that we really need to focus on are like, how like government divides people. I think, talking about like the social, I guess like the integration, social integration, I think breaking these barriers and like being able to make humorous jokes about these kind of things, I think that's a much better step in that direction than like attacking people. Like I think, cause like I feel like me and Doozy, we can make those kind of jokes with each other because we're such good friends. And because it's something that like it doesn't bother us. It doesn't bother me that he's mixed, or it doesn't, obviously it doesn't bother me that
You asked him, if you were, what his price would be, for you to say, have an N-word pass, so like when do you use that word with him?
No,
Like
no.
when you guys are just hanging out as buddies?
No, I do not use context. I will quote Chris Rock. The only time I ever used the N word is in the car with a rap with a rap song when I'm by myself. I will admit that. I will do that anytime because I'm going on to music. But
So
no,
when you're alone and you're in the car, you
sure,
shout it. Okay.
sure. I shout it. I mean, I'm not like rolling down my window like, "Hey, this is my time."
Right. Right.
No,
Okay.
but no, I mean, no, I'm not the kind of guy who's using that word. I'm not the kind of guy who's like going
it just
around
piqued
it.
my interest.
I think, and here's the thing. Because I think a lot of times the people who do use those kind of words and are like that, they're not making the kind of humor I am. I lived in a small town in South Dakota called Canton. And I mean, it was a town where people, when they used that word and when they used it, it was really with malice. It was like looking down at people of color. And like that was something that infuriated me because it's like, you're just making assumptions about someone because of that.
Right.
And I think it kind of goes the same way with something like the N-word. Is like, yes, there's something offensive with that, but there's also a set of expectations and a set of, like, this is what happens. I think both barriers are important to break down. I think if people want to have honest conversations, you got to be able to break down these taboo subjects and you got to be able to have real conversation. Like, okay, race aside or class aside or whatever, like you and me as people, like what is the common ground here? What are the things we agree on? What are the ways that we can, and like if someone gets offended by my humor, like I would hate that. I would hate that. Like if I were to make a joke, like with someone on a podcast and they actually felt really offended, like I would feel fucking awful about
Right.
that. Like it's always from a stance where I'm trying to be humorous. I guess that's
I was just curious.
No, you're good. No, hey, it's valid.
Listen to
Valid.
it and I found it
Look, I mean,
to be interesting.
Sure. I mean, look, I'm like being someone that has edgy humor. Like I gotta expect people to get pissed. I gotta expect people to, and and I take that as I take that how I get.
I wouldn't give you an N word. By the way, there's no
I wouldn't want one.
There's no money. There's no amount of money.
Just a couple slaps in the face.
No, you get the white card. You get the white card, and that's it.
I don't want any cards. I'm good. I'm autistic, so I got that card already.
Okay. Okay, so you got the disability.
Yeah, exactly.
The special needs.
Yeah, that's my excuse for the N-word jokes. Actually, I'm autistic.
Oh, okay. It's on that type of time.
No, I fucking hate. Sorry to tangent on that point, but I do fucking hate. That is like an aspect of like the autistic community that look, like talking shit about my own community, right? Like people that like fucking use that, basically equate like autisticness to like be mentally challenged or retardation. It's like like you look at like someone like Elon Musk, who's like very high functioning and like doing amazing things. Like I really wish.
Yeah, but you can tell he's definitely got a.
Sure, no, it's a spectrum.
Social, yeah,
it's a spectrum for sure.
He's got a social disability.
Sure.
For sure.
But I think the way, and I'm not a therapist or a medical expert or anything like that, but like just anecdotally, I think the way to, even for someone who's like really low functioning, like the way to pass that is not by just like coddling them or like, get like treating them like that.
Low functioning.
Well,
okay, so
like autism is a spectrum, right? Like I'm someone that's considered high functioning. Like, we can have a conversation. I'm not like, I'm not acting out or anything like that. But then there's like low functioning, the people who like, they're in their mom's basement type of thing.
Okay.
So I guess the point is like people tend to equate autism to like that low spectrum type of like the Rain Man caricature.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And and kind of going back into like race, like there are just these things in life that are not black and white, and that I think I wish people would just look at them, take it case by case and be like, hey, what's going on here?
I agree with that.
So.
Okay. Anything else?
To fuck you, Coleman.
I was gonna ask you about the recent UFOs. I just told you about that today.
Yeah.
So do you think there's like, have you ever seen The Quiet Place?
Yes.
So do you think it's like
coming? I don't really know how I feel about the whole UFO thing. Well, to be fair, I haven't really looked into it too much. I'll admit that.
Yeah, they called the police. They have it on recording. Evidently, it was like two sons and their dad out working on their truck at night. And a craft crashed in their yard.
Okay.
And two beings got out, and they called the police, and like the police showed up, took a police report and everything. They said that their two beings got out, and they were like 10 feet tall, and they were black. They had really big mouths and big shiny eyes. And he's like, they were not human. They were definitely not human. Like this is like a normal kid that's like 16, 17 years old. He's not making this up, you know? And then like the police come out and take reports from multiple witnesses. And then they were talking about like, they walked over to the crash site, like where they heard it crash to look at it. And he said, when I looked at it, it was blurry. He's like, not my vision. Like the area where it was at, like was blurry. Like it had some sort of cloaking camouflage technology around it that was obscuring it in some way. So, yeah, I mean, how many movies start like this? That's how The Quiet Place starts. I mean, they're just watching a football game and...
Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
Baseball game, and these crafts start crashing, and these monsters get out, and...
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Have you ever heard of Eric Weinstein?
Yes.
So he did a podcast. I don't know if you saw the last episode where he was on Joe Rogan.
I did, yes.
Okay. He talked in that episode about like how government officials like contacted him to work on this.
Yeah.
And I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure from his estimation, it seemed like the UFO activity was like, he was like 93% sure it was like government. And that's that's always kind of the thing I wonder with this UFO stuff. I kind of wonder how much of it is actually UFOs and how much of it is just the government. They have these secret technologies that, you know,
they've reverse engineered or something, or they've created.
Exactly.
I don't think
And
we're
that they're
that
hyphen.
advanced yet, because if we were, it'd be more obvious.
Really?
We can't, there's things we can't do.
Well, maybe.
You know, there's things that like that Tic Tac video with that Commander David Fravor of the Air Force, like the way they were following that thing, it had no heat signature, nothing, you know, and the way it moved, the way it dived down and took off, like that would kill a human being. Like the G-force would just absolutely splatter you inside, you know, your skeleton would come out of your body. Like everything. You can't move like that in time and space as a human being. Like, unless we figured out some insane sort of like shielding and gravitational field. And if we do have that technology, we're wasting it poorly. I don't think we have that yet. I just don't think we're there.
Well, that is
I don't know if anybody on the planet is. Like, maybe China would be close, but I don't think we're there yet. I think we're off probably by a couple hundred years even.
Yeah. Well,
we're still taking off from the ground with rockets. If we could get there faster, we would.
Sure.
That'd be a perk. If you could do this stuff, we would.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at that whole question of like, you know, being visited by, you know, aliens or whatever in itself, like you got to think of like how much time it takes to like get across and like
wormholes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like if you think about like I feel like the only way you'd be able to achieve that and like achieve like an invasion or achieve like being visited by other planets, you would have to be able to warp time.
Absolutely.
And fundamentally, if we know how to warp time, we would know about it. Because at some point in the time continuum, someone would say, hey, we're going back to Des Moines, Iowa, 2023, and we're going to tell everybody, hey, it's like like the, you know, the big like, the idea of the Big Bang Theory. Like you do something enough times and eventually it'll happen.
Maybe.
So
have you seen that new show on Sci-Fi called The Lazarus Project?
I have not.
It's good. It's about this. It's about they have an ability to go back in time.
Okay.
And basically the world has ended like 6 or 7 times at this point, and they've gone back and averted it in some way.
Okay.
He was asking, like, why didn't you guys go back and stop COVID? And she said something to the effect of, you guys had a vaccine in 9 months. You think we didn't go back? And it was like, whoa. Like, what if they really have this technology out there and they could be doing that shit? Because I was super suspicious, too. Like, a vaccine, 9 months, don't take that shit. Like, take it if you feel like it's safe for you. It's your choice, but I'm not going to think about it. Like, and I'm like, yo, dude, what if they have this technology? And they've just been going back and we just don't know it. There's nobody. And the reason this guy is special is because for whatever reason, he's able to remember these time jumps. He's able to remember when this happens. And there's very few people that are able to, that are conscious, have enough consciousness to be like, I've lived this. It took him to like the second day. The second time he's like, I've done this before. I think it takes people. He's the first one to like, because he's like, yeah, I figured it out on the second day that I've already done this. People thought he was going crazy. I'm like, this is a good show. I might watch this because this might be some real shit.
Yeah. No, the time shit's fucky, but I mean,
Time's an illusion. That's
yeah.
not real. We live in Matrix.
That's an interesting theory. Yeah. What do you think about like alternate? Like, do you think it's like a Rick and Morty where it's like there's alternate?
It's a multiverse
dimensions?
for sure.
Okay.
I don't know if you watched Michio Kaku.
No.
He's one of the creators of string theory. On Joe Rogan recently. He was building an arc reactor in his fucking garage at 17 years old in Japan. This guy is insanely smart, and that's what they're doing. He talked about the multiverse basically, and the idea of being able to access these points in the multiverse or being able to move between them. And he said something at that point like, "Why do you think Marvel's making this such a thing?" Because, at some point it's going to be unavoidable that we're going to run into a situation. I'm like, that's interesting. One of the smartest people on the planet, and he's sitting there telling you that there's a multiverse and you probably should hey, the reason they're telling you this is probably because it's real and you just think it's a fun movie. This is fun. This is happening infinite different ways.
Yeah.
If you could just step through this veil, you're in a different reality and you find yourself there.
Yeah. Well, that's when it's done correctly, that's the beautiful thing about science, is that we find evidence for things and we keep going, and it's exciting, right? It's exciting for these new.
Destroy the planet with a black hole that you've created in your lab, and it's a Rick and Morty thing, and you have to jump to a different universe.
There's always a possibility, yes, but some would argue that's worth it for that possibility.
All right, I'm gonna wrap this up. So tell people where to find you, and plug yourself.
All right. McAllister Hours, the McAllister Hours. You can find me on pretty much anything, Spotify, YouTube. We have a website, even, McAllisterHours.com. We also have a Patreon where you can find exclusive content there for only $4 a month. So we got behind the scenes episodes, clips, that kind of stuff. We're every Monday and Thursday at 7 p.m. is when we're on. So stay tuned for us then.
Awesome. There you go. So y'all know where you can find me. This is the Last Word with Naya podcast. You can also find me. We have the Arts Festival coming up, June 24th. You can find me on a stage, downtown Des Moines Arts Festival. You can find me at Mars Cafe as well. If you guys are looking, you guys can come to Mars Cafe, Stars at Mars. Follow the page. Open mic if you are an artist, if you're creative. Come down there, reach out. Let's build each other up. We're just trying to build this dream, right? Build this city.
Hell yeah.
Put Des Moines on the map. So, Eli Live behind the film, as always. We'll see you guys for another one. We're out.
All right. Peace, guys. Hey, thanks for having me on.
No problem.